Well, I suppose it's time I tell this story. Now, before I get into why I did this, I just want to say that those watching, there's sure to be some people that are going to think or say something along the lines of this is a shame or embarrassment or disrespect to all the people that have fought and died for our country and all that stuff. These things are, what I'm about to say, what I did, is mutually compatible with me having respect for people who fight and die for the country. So I also want you to consider the fact that not only did I disobey every order given to me in the Navy, but I'm also making a video about it to the world. So that should clue you into how little I don't care. I promise, whatever level you think I care less. So, all right. So that being said, let's jump right in, shall we? I went into the Navy in February of 2021, and that was right when COVID was really rampant. There were still quarantines and stuff, and we had to quarantine at Fort McCoy, Wisconsin, for 2 weeks before we actually got to Great Lakes. We went to Great Lakes just to get our stuff. We would get all our stuff, and then we went to Fort McCoy and quarantined for 2 weeks there before we went back to Great Lakes to actually start officially boot camp. It was like negative 20 degrees every single day. It was absolutely freezing. And there was nothing to do. You couldn't do anything. You just had to like sit on you had a small bed, and there was a bench at the foot of it. You just basically sat there, and we all made friends and got along, and I still keep in touch with at least one dude that I met at Fort McCoy. But anyway, so we did that, and then we went to Great Lakes, and it was 8 weeks it was either 8 or 10 weeks of basic training. I think it was 8. But I also got Ring of Fire there because it was COVID. If you had a temperature, they would take temperatures every single morning. And in my first division that I was in, it was an 800 division, which means that it was mostly special operations because I was going in to do rescue swimmer. That was my rate. They call it the rate in the Navy. I think they call it MOS in the Army and the Marines or the Air Force. I'm not sure. They call it different things in different branches, but in the Navy they call it your rate. That's your job, basically. So I was going in for rescue swimmer, which is technically a special operations program. So they put me in an 800 division, which was mostly dudes going out for SWIC, or they were going out for SEAL, or they were going out for rescue swimmer, they're going out for DOD, going out for diver. Those are all the special operations. So, but unfortunately, I got ROMmed. I got Ring of Fired, and we had to go to Midway, a huge gymnasium that they had in Great Lakes. It's called Midway. And you go there, and it's literally the most dystopian shit you've ever seen. It's like a huge gymnasium, way bigger than the gymnasium that you have at your local high school or something like that. Huge, and cubicles for just as far as the eye can see. And you just go in your cubicle and basically just chill for 14 days. It's actually a pretty sweet gig. It was the most chill of all the experience of being in the Navy. You literally just chill there and eat MREs and eat a bunch of junk that they give you, and you don't really do much. So but we found ways to keep ourselves interested. I'm going to try to speed through this as much as I can. There's so much that I could get into, but I have to get into why I started disobeying orders. Um, but anyway, so then was there, finished out boot camp, obviously, and then went to Pensacola. And Pensacola is where NACIS, that's Air Crew School, is, and then RSS, which is Rescue Swimmer School. And so we were on the NACIS side of the base. We're not on A school side because there's an A school side which does all the technical training, but we were doing air crew stuff. So that's NACIS purely. They had their own side of the base for that. So I went into we did preload, which was basically like they preload you. You do a bunch of like swimming and a bunch of exercise and a bunch of fitness stuff, and they call them grinders. They call them grinders, which is basically just another name for a bunch of calisthenics and a bunch of running and stuff like that. And then there's a bunch of pool work as well, with mass and stuff, mass clearing. You do underwaters and all that stuff. So we did about I want to say it was like 2 to 3 months of that, of preload, which actually was good because it got my fitness back up, because you actually lose fitness in boot camp because you get almost zero sleep, and you're on your feet all the time, and the fitness is terrible, and the food is, you're getting underfed, and it's awful. So but it was good. It got my fitness back. Then classed up around, I think it was in like June or something like that. I think I classed up. Now RSS is 6 weeks long, but it is 4 weeks of PT. So the first 4 weeks are actually the hardest, because that's basically the bulk of, like, that's when everybody drops, right? That's when you get your attrition. And I want to just preface this before I get into it. The whole reason why I went into the Navy to begin with is because I was very tired of all the games of regular life. I was tired of the political, like this whole political game that seems to be played everywhere. And I have zero political game in me. I don't game people. I don't game anything. I am who I am. I'm up front. I can't schmooze and please and fake nice and fake ingratiate myself and all this stuff. And this seems to be everywhere, especially in corporate America. Like any job that you have, like that's what you're kind of gonna come up against. So dudes that they're just real, and they don't want to fake themselves and fake schmooze their bosses, who are awful people who they don't respect, just to sell their soul to get more money and just at a job they hate. And like, bro. So I hated this. So the reason that I went into the Navy was because I saw that the Navy was all about, well, it was special operations. I wanted to do something wild because I had just been caged up for about 9 months, because all of us in COVID, we were like, caged up or whatever. And I wanted something wild. I wanted something different. And I also saw that the military was, it would be cool to be a rescue swimmer. I thought that was going to be sick. It turns out it's not as sick as you think. But I wanted something different. I just wanted something different. So, and getting back to my main point was, I wanted something that was based on the simple fact that you just don't quit. Like, you can make it if you just don't quit. And there's certain testing numbers, like obviously you have to PST to get into, like, to keep all throughout boot camp and all throughout training, all the way up until RSS, you had to PST. I think I PST'd, which is basically a fitness test. It's a 1.5 miles. It's a push-ups, sit-ups in 2 minutes, and pull-ups, all that you can do in 2 minutes. And you have to meet certain numbers to keep your contract. You have to keep your contract. So if you fail those numbers, then you lose your contract, and then you end up just getting re-rated to some other, whatever job the Navy wants to give you, you don't get to pick. And so I had to keep that job. So you basically just meet your PST numbers, and then when you get into RSS, you know, just don't quit. That's the whole thing that you hear, right? You hear all, if any of you have watched any training of military training of, you know, special operations programs, the whole thing is you just don't quit. Yeah, unfortunately, I was in for a rude awakening, so it's not that simple. Politics is very much in the military as well. But so it was the last day of PT. Consider this. Just consider this. I've done 4 weeks, made it through all the 4 weeks, and we're on the last day of PT, and this is when we secure it. So when you secure something, it means that you're ending it. You've ended it. You've completed it. We're going to secure PT. So this is the last training day, grinder day of PT. And they performance dropped me. Now, I won't get into it. I'm not going to make excuses. I'll just say that I was performance dropped because that's what happened. I was performance dropped. But on the last day of PT, there's so much that I could say about this, but it's going, anything I say is going to sound like an excuse. Anything more than just accepting what happened to me is going to sound like an excuse, and I'm well aware of that. So we'll just say that I was performance dropped. There you go. So I was dropped, didn't make it, and then I went to, they put you in a thing called First Lieutenant, as First Louis, and they basically just move you to a separate barracks where all of other people that have been dropped, or they're in First Lieutenant, they're getting re-rated, they're awaiting something, they've dropped their programs. You await your re-rate, and then I got re-rated, and they made me some sort of avionics, it's like electrician, it was ATI. Yeah, it was called ATI. And basically you're just, you know, an electrician for airplanes and helicopters and stuff like that, which I didn't want to do. Obviously, I was bummed. I was the only reason I went into the Navy was to do a special operations program. If I wasn't a rescue swimmer, I didn't want to be in the Navy. Just point blank period. That's a lot of dudes that actually go into special operations program. Any dude that goes in for like SEAL or SWIC or a DOD or a diver or anything like that, they go in, most of them, they only go in because they want that rate. They don't want to be in the Navy. They want to do that specific job, which is, so that's where we're kind of different from most people that go in the Navy, because they just want to be in the Navy. They don't really care what job they have. So yeah, I did not want to be in the Navy anymore. Just to be quite frank, I was really struggling for a while with being in the Navy. I talked to my dad while I was in, and I was like, you know, I just don't, you know, I just really don't like this and all this stuff. He was like, well, you got to stick it out. My dad is, he's a colonel. He's retired now, but he was a colonel and in the Air Force, and so, you know, he's the pure, just, you know, military man, just standard, you know, as military as he can get. So obviously he was telling me to stay in. So here's when I start disobeying orders. So I'm at a school side, so we're going to technical training every single day. So there's class every single day, and there's PT in the morning at 4:30, 4:45 in the morning. So you have to get up for PT, and then you do about an hour of PT, and then you go to class at 7. But you have to eat before that, so you go to chow. I actually hate that I'm saying chow. I'm saying all these terms that I've done my best to forget, but they're all coming back to me, so that makes me vomit. So I'm supposed to go to class, and so I go to class. I'm going to class, man. And at the time, I was just like vaping a lot. I was just vape. Like, you're not supposed to vape. Nobody's supposed to have vapes because you're still in student status. All of us on Pensacola, it is a student base, so you're still in student status. And, You know, if you're in school, if you're in A school or NACAS, you are student status. So you're not yet um, you're not yet at your rated job. You're not, I guess you could say, you're not officially in the fleet yet. You're not officially in the fleet. You are a member of the Navy, obviously, but you're not in the fleet yet. You're not on a ship or anything like that. And so you're still in student status. You're not allowed to have vapes. You're not allowed to have alcohol. Obvious stuff. Like, it's very strict. It's very strict. You can't have nothing. You can't have nothing. And you can't even have outside food. Like, you're supposed to have your own, like, in your barracks, in your room, you can't even have, like, outside food. You're supposed to eat, like, if you go to the vending machine, you're supposed to eat this stuff, like immediately, and you're not supposed to keep it in your room or anything like that. That actually was NACA's side. At A school, you could keep like a soda and some chips in your room, but you can't have like vapes or anything. You can't have alcohol, obviously. You can't have any, like, obviously any weapons or anything like that. But at NACA's side, that was the aircrew side. You couldn't have nothing in your room. Like, you couldn't have outside food. You couldn't have anything. You had to eat all that stuff in like a common area. But anyway, so, you know, you have to do a bunch of musters, and you know, it's just the Navy, man. Like, a lot of you don't really know, like, there's so much that goes into this. The brainwashing that they do is absolute, and it is complete. Like, let me tell you, it is absolute. It is complete. It is impressive what they do in 8 weeks of Great Lakes training. It's even for me, I went in as a 28-year-old. I was basically an adult at that point. Most of the people that I'm going through with are like young. They're 18, 19-year-olds. They have no experience of the world yet. They're just coming out of high school. I had a lot of experience with the world. I was a full-grown adult. I had seen the way that the world worked. And but I mean, still they get into your mind, man. So you know, when I touch on like mind control topics on this channel, just know that you know, this is kind of how I know. So I'm going to class, and I'm sitting there in class, and they're going over, it's a bunch of math, man. It's just a bunch of math for all this electrician stuff. And I'm sitting at the back of the class. You know, I'm exiting, like, you know, 20 minutes at a time to just go vape in the bathroom. And, you know, just, I don't care. I don't want to be here. I don't care about math. I hate math. I hate math. Hate it. It was my least favorite subject. Failed statistics in high school. Hate math. So I'm sitting back there, and all these nerds are in here that, like, they went in for this raid. Like, they actually went into the Navy for ATI. So of course they're all like super interested, and they're all nerds and geeks. Bro, I'm a drop from from aircrew school. So, like, I just don't want to be here. So, you know, I'm sitting there, and it hits me one day after I've gone for maybe like 2 weeks. And it's like 14 weeks long. It's a pretty long training school. I'm there for about 2 weeks. I passed like one test. I think we took one test in that time, or two, and I passed them. And I'm sitting there one day, and I'm just doodling and just like contemplating my predicament. And it just hits me. I'm like, it hit me all at once. I said to myself, I'm done. I'm done with everything. I'm done. I'll take whatever punishment I need, but I'm going to get out. I'm going to get out of this. I'm going to get out of the Navy. I promise. I promised myself. I will find a way. And the one thing that they condition you to believe when you go in is you can't get out. You're in a contract. You're in a 4-year or 6-year contract in my case. I was in a 6-year contract because it was special operations. And yeah, so I was in a 6-year contract, but now I was re-rated. I think I was in a 5-year or 4-year or something like that for ATI. But I was like, I'm going to get out. And I was not only going to get out, but I was done. Like, that's one thing. You can still follow orders and still go to class and like work on getting out. You can get out while still like progressing through training. It's definitely doable. But I was done with everything. I was literally, I could not take another order. Like, I could not take another moment of this stuff. My mind just broke, man. I was just like, I just, uh, I don't know. I don't know. I don't know why I got to that point, but I had seen that there were certain people that I was talking, I was talking around to certain people, and certain things get spread around the barracks and around the training school and all this stuff. People talk. Like, obviously, we all talk. And it was made apparent to me that you could like self-report. You can self-report, like you can like smoke weed or like do a drug and then self-report. And so I had this idea that I was going to do that. I was going to self-report. I was just going to like smoke weed and self-report and then just get out. And I didn't really care about, I just didn't want a dishonorable discharge, because you can get dishonorable discharges, but if you self-report, I'm pretty sure it's a general under honorable because you're self-reporting. Um, but I didn't really care about whether I got an honorable or a general under honorable, which is basically just an honorable. And then there's a dishonorable, which is dishonorable discharge is actually very hard to get. You have to get court-martialed for a dishonorable discharge. And court-martials are reserved for very serious things. Serious, like crime, selling drugs, having like huge drug possession, the type of drugs that you have, domestic violence, obviously, rape, murder, like all that stuff. Like, court-martial is for serious stuff. And for lesser stuff, things like what I was doing, there's something called captain's mast. Now, everybody was terrified of going to captain's mast. You're made to fear captain's mast. It's this terrible thing. From the moment you go to Great Lakes, you don't want to go to captain's mast. Captain's mast is like awful, because from captain's mast they can put you in restriction. Restriction is basically just, it's like prison, but you're in a barracks. You're not actually in a prison, in a military prison. You're just in a separate part of the barracks where they just basically treat you like a prisoner. You have no phone, you have no like personal belongings. You're alone, and you have no internet and all this stuff. And you're just alone with your thoughts, basically. And so nobody wanted to go to restriction. So one day I said, you know what, I'm not going to go to class. I didn't want to go to class, and I didn't want to go to PT. I stopped going to PT. I just told whoever was coming to knock on my door, because they do musters, so everybody's got to be accounted for. So if you're not there, then somebody comes and knocks on your door. Hey, what do you got to come to PT. I was like, nah, I ain't doing it, bro. You can report me to whoever the I forget what they're even called, but there's an office on the quarterdeck, which is basically the lobby of the barracks. There's an office and a desk and stuff like this. It's basically just like a hotel. Just look at it as like a hotel. There's a front office and a desk, and yeomen work the desk. They're called yeomen, and then there's all the petty officers and the chiefs and stuff that work the barracks. I was like, just report me to whoever. I don't care. And so I didn't go to class, and then the first time that I didn't, I actually got, it was I think it was it was like a petty officer third class and a chief. Was it a chief? They came to my room and they knocked on my door, banged on it. I mean, they want to intimidate the shit out of you. They want to just scare the living hell out of you all the time. So they are banging on it. So I open the door and they're like, why aren't you in class? Evans, get your stuff on, go to class. And I was like, nah, I'm not going to class. Like, get your stuff on, go to class. They come in, like, open my blinds, get your stuff on, go to class. And I was like, I'm not going to class. And they were like, do you want to go to the brig? So that's the threat, right? So that's the threat. You want to go to the brig, which is basically prison. Like, it is military prison. You're disobeying an order, you want to go to the brig? I can call the MAs and they can escort you to the brig. So they said that to me, and I was like, fuck. I was like, it kind of it got to me. It got to me, right? I did not want that to happen. And so I went to class. Now, I think it was maybe the next day or the next day that I said, I basically was just like, I thought about it for a while. I thought about why would they throw me in the brig? So I started ruminating on this. I'm talking to other dudes. We're going through it. We're figuring this stuff out. I'm talking to other people. We're figuring all like the little loopholes out. Like, what can you get away with here? What can they do and what can't they do? I'm starting to like kind of, I want to see what they actually can do. What's actually just BS and what's truth. And so I came to the conclusion that I was like, I don't think they can throw me in the brig. While I'm a student, going to the brig is something that they do for court martials. If you get court-martialed and you can get convicted, you go to the brig. But going to the brig is not a thing when you're just in student status and you're just disobeying orders. It's not reserved for those people. It's reserved for like serious, offenders and, criminals. So maybe 3 days went by or 2 days went by, I don't know, and I did the same thing. I didn't go to class, and they bang on the door. They're like, "What's going? Like, go to class. Go to the class." I said, "No, I'm not going to class." And they were like, "You want to go to the brig?" I was like, "Hey, if you want to take me to the brig, go ahead." And this like got to them. This got to them. I can tell they're when you feel like the adrenaline coming off of people, like their adrenaline's high. So I'm like, if you guys were really confident, I wouldn't be able to feel your adrenaline. You would just be so sure. You'd just be so relaxed, like you're gonna go to the brig. But they were like, I could feel like their nervousness, and I was like, I don't know about this. So I was like, yeah, you guys can take me to the brig, whatever. And so that was the first time. And then, the whole day I was like waiting to go to the brig, waiting for the MAs to knock on my door and like go to the brig or whatever. And it never happened. The day never came. And so that was kind of the first moment where I was like, okay, this is going to maybe this is different. Maybe this is actually something, maybe I'm onto something here. So what they ended up doing is they ended up, it was a disciplinary review board, DRB, and they could have captain's masted me, but I think that they knew. So here's the thing: you can actually refuse captain's mast, and then it goes directly to court martial. But then what they have to do is they have to decide, is this serious enough to court martial him? So it was actually a loophole. So they could throw me in restriction. This is the thing. For what I was doing, disobeying orders, not going to class, not going to musters, not going to PT, basically just not following any order is what I started to do. They could have captain's masted me, and if I had shown up to captain's mast, if I had accepted captain's mast and shown up to it, then they could have put me in restriction and, put me in like 6 months restriction or something like that. It made my life really bad. And just nothing, no contact with anybody, all this stuff. They could have docked my pay too. They can dock your pay, all this stuff. And they can change your rate. They can make you just I forget what the name is, but it's just like the lowest rate of all. It's like you're just unrated. So basically you're just, you go on a ship and you just chip paint or whatever. And I was at the chief warrant officer that did my DRB. He actually threatened my mother over the phone that was going to happen. She called all worried and everything. He was thinking that I was like some 18, 17-year-old kid that actually cares what his parents think. Like my parents can change me. Like they can, like oh no, my parents are upset, or oh they threatened my parents and now they're talking to me. Like I'm gonna change. Like no, bro, I'm a 28-year-old man. Like I'm a grown ass man. Like I do what I want. And so anyway, I get this DRB. It's a chief warrant officer. I think it was a chief warrant officer 5, or I forget how many chief warrant officers there are. Chief warrant officer 3. And he calls me into his office. He's the head of training at Pensacola aviation technical school or something like that. It's something like that. I forget the fucking name, but of the building. So he calls me into his office. It's on the ground floor, and he says, uh, basically just like from the jump, it's like just tearing into me, like, are you fucking stupid? Like, why aren't you doing this stuff? Or you know what? No, it was actually, it was actually nice at first. They were like, so, it was like Seaman Evans or something like that. It was like, why aren't you going to class? So we're told you're not going to class. Why aren't you going to class? And I pleaded the fifth. I just pleaded the fifth for every single question. So I just said I plead the fifth, and they were like, what do you plead the fifth to? I was like, I plead the fifth to answering that question. And then I think it was the chief warrant officer. He was like, Airman Evans or Seaman Evans, where are you from? I was like, I plead the fifth. And they just lose it. Like the dude loses it. There's another guy in there. I think there was maybe 2 other guys in there aside from the chief warrant officer, and they just lose it, man. Like, are you fucking stupid? We're trying to help you. Blah, 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 blah. You're going to be on a ship shipping paint. Like, I'm going to make your life miserable, all this stuff. Blah, 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 blah. Get the fuck out of my office, all this stuff. So I got out, I just left. And then he calls my mom and thinks that that's going to do something. He threatens her, scares the living shit out of her. But so yeah, I just stopped following orders. What ended up happening is they actually had to get me out. They had to get me out because I refused the vaccine because I'm not an idiot. I'm not going to take that shit. So I refused the vaccine. And so they had to actually discharge me then, because they weren't going to discharge me. They were trying everything they were going to re-rate me. Like, dude, I was trying to get out. I was doing everything. I was disobeying orders. I was self-reporting. I was doing all these things. They were still like trying to re-rate me, trying to get me to go like on a ship in Asia and stuff like this. They were going like they at least that was the threat. And like they even had me sign, like they wanted me to sign paperwork that said that I was going to do this. Of course I didn't sign it. And so they were trying to keep, which is wild. They were actually trying to keep me in the Navy because they could see what I was doing. And then unfortunately they had to just discharge me because I refused the vaccine. So the vaccine mandate came down. Everybody had to get the vaccine. If you were in, any government job, you had to get the vaccine, unless you had some sort of religious exemption. But that should have been reported when you started your government job. So, which I didn't claim. So they had to get rid of me, and even though they should have gotten rid of me for a ton of other stuff, like, self-reporting that I smoked weed, even though it was Delta 9 weed. It wasn't actually really weed. It was like a Delta 9 version. It was like a legal version of it at the time in Florida. And so they could have got me out for that. They could have got me out for disobeying all the orders that I disobeyed. I mean, from man, it must have been like August or September. I think it was August of 2021 all the way until I got out, which was September of 2022. For about a year, I disobeyed all orders. So I didn't go to musters. I didn't care what and they eventually left me alone. They transferred me to a different barracks. They separated me from the rest of the fleet, from the rest of the dudes that were going through school. And there were other dudes that were with me. And yeah, they separated me, and they just left me alone. They just stopped because they knew that they just had no power. And what ended up happening is actually I got a handful of dudes that were actually doing the same thing. So all these dudes getting out for the vaccine, they actually all ended up doing the same thing, which is not following orders and just doing whatever they wanted. And so I actually started a little bit of a mini movement. And so I was It's a bit of a problem. But man, I just tell this story as like I tell this story as sort of an example of like, you know, power. There are so many forms of power and abstract power that are all imaginary. They're imaginary, and you just have to see through it. Like it exists in life too. You know, if you're afraid in your mind, if you mind, you know, if you're afraid in your mind, then people have power over you. But if you're not, if you don't care what they do, or you don't believe that they'll do it, if whatever they're threatening, you don't care that they do it, or you won't believe that they'll do it, then they cease to have power over you. And you know, personally, I hate acting from fear. You know, I was doing things in the Navy because I was fearful of what would happen to me if I didn't. And I feel like that's the whole Navy. And systems like that, you know, being really afraid of that stuff, having threats made against you and stuff, and you know, every single part of your life is like dictated, and you're told what to do and how to do it in specific ways. I was just done with that, and I didn't want to. I just felt like there was so much fear in the way that I was existing and living my life, and I just couldn't. I just couldn't live like that anymore. I was just like, nah, I'm I'm done being fearful of what they're gonna do to me, or what they say to me, or anything like that. Like, I'm gonna do what I want to do. I'm gonna do what I need to do, and I don't care what. You know, obviously, I did my due diligence to make sure that, in fact, I was gonna call their bluff, and I had to know that they had nothing. You know, I was doing my due diligence to be like, you know, if I call their bluff, it has to be that they're bluffing. Like, if I call the bluff, I need to know that they're bluffing, or I need to know with a high certainty that they're actually bluffing. Because if I call their bluff and they have the cards, then I'm, you know, kind of fucked. But I came to a point where actually I was fine either way. I was fine either way. I was like, you know what? I literally was ready to like be court-martialed and go to the brig and all this stuff, because you don't actually know. This is all information that they never give you. You don't know any of this stuff. They'll never tell you any of this stuff. This is how they keep control of everybody. Is they put everybody in such big like fear systems. You know, you don't want this to happen to you. There's punishments for everything. And the information that you need, like the actual truth, what they can actually do and what they say they can do, there's a huge disparity there between what they can do and what they say they can do, what they threaten they can do. Huge disparity. But as long as people believe that, as long as people don't know that that disparity exists, as long as people believe that, you know, what they're saying they can do and what they threaten they can do is actually what they can do, then everybody, you know, will fall in line. And yeah, for me, it was like that was the crux of I had to get to that. I had to get to that. I had to figure that one out. I had to be like, what actually can they do? And am I fine if they can do this? Am I fine with accepting this? And the answer was yes. You know, if they were going to court martial me and throw me in the brig for 6 months or a year, I came to the decision that I was fine with it. You know, I was like, you know, I'm just not doing this. So, again, all that to say, you know, that's my own personal, you know, that was my experience with the Navy. And I'm sure there's a lot of people that are in the Navy and they love the Navy and they love following orders. This is not to say that following orders is bad. You know, if you like to follow orders, then, you know, all power to you. That's good for you. You know, there's tons of men and women that I respect that, you know, fought and died for the country, and, you know, taking nothing away from them. You know, they wanted to follow orders. They wanted to be in the Navy. They wanted to serve their country or whatever. That was their thing, you know. All props to them. Nothing wrong with that. Nothing wrong with that. I'm not saying that stuff's wrong. No, not at all. I'm just saying that for me, You know, it was just a different path. I just interfaced with the Navy in a different way. It was a different journey. I had to learn a different lesson from them. You know, they were a lesson that needed to be learned for me. I had to figure out who I was, you know. It really was an eye-opening experience for me, because it was in that moment that I really found out who I was. You know, I was a person that would, you know, sacrifice, you know, I would sacrifice myself um, for certain principles that I had. You know, I guess I have certain principles that I will just, I can't, I won't, I won't sacrifice them, or I won't be negotiated against them, or something like that. Um, you know, it was really, it was quite eye-opening. And now, when I'm out in the real world, you know, you just see through all the bullshit just so much clearer. Everything's bullshit, you know. People are full of it. People are full of it. Everybody's full of it. Everybody is bullshitting you. Promise you. If the Navy was bullshitting me, all that stuff, if they're full of shit, bro, everybody's full of shit, man. Everybody out here in the world, like, now they think like, oh, they can, like, what they're saying to me is like supposed to make me feel a certain way, or supposed to be fearful of something, or I'm supposed to care at all. They're trying to exert some form of power. Like, just the other day, I was delivering some stuff to a front desk of a concierge of a apartment building, and she wants to threaten that my truck's gonna get towed and that I need to use the freight elevator and all this stuff. Bro, she's full of shit, and I can just see it immediately, and I don't care. Like, I just don't care. I'm gonna do what I want. I mean, it's not like I'm, you know, I'm against all authority. It's not like I won't do what people tell me if it makes sense. But if it don't make sense, if you're just trying to do some power trip and trying to fuck with my mind, I know what that's like. I have a very keen sense of that. You know, this was done to me on a level that most people, they don't know what they just, you don't know. You don't know. And when you see this stuff, when you experience this stuff at its like pinnacle, for the pinnacle of like mind control, and you know, controlling you with fear, and you know, having you believe all these certain things that can happen to you, then out in the real world, everybody's, you know, it's like everybody's a joke. It's like y'all are just, I'm just push you over, like you're just nothing. And you know, especially a woman at a concierge desk, like trying to like, you're nothing. Like, you know, so, you know, definitely taught me a lot. And I definitely interact and interface with the world in a completely different way now, you know. But yeah, I think that's about good. It's probably a long ass video, but all right, that's it. This video.